Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I'm your host of Killer Instinct. And before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you're looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, you can always find that over on our Patreon. The link is always in the description box below, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can find that link at the top of the page or the episodes embedded into the feed. Over on Patreon, we post an additional 3 exclusive episodes a month, plus an exclusive live stream at the end of the month as well. So make sure you go check that out if you have not already. But with that being said, let's talk about why we are here today. As you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the brutal murder of Jayna Murray, which is otherwise known as the Lululemon murders. Now, this case first took place in 2011, and when it occurred, it captured the nation's attention. It captured the media's attention. However, we have not yet covered it on this podcast, and that is what we are here to do today. So with that all being said, let's jump right on into it. Jayna Murray was born on November 22nd, 1980 in Wichita, Kansas, to her parents, David and Phyllis Murray. Jayna grew up with her 2 brothers and in a family that was incredibly close. Her oldest brother, Hugh, was a triathlete. He went to law school and was in the U.S. Army's JAG Corps and served as a captain in Iraq. Her other brother, Dirk, competed in bull riding and was also a pilot. As for Jayna, she attended St. Louis University in Madrid, doing a study abroad program before graduating from George Washington University with a Bachelor of Science degree. Jayna was also only 2 months away from completing her master's degree in business administration from Johns Hopkins University at the time of her murder. Some of Jayna's favorite things were traveling, dancing. She also loved animals. She would spend a lot of her free time volunteering at a wide variety of nonprofit organizations. She was someone who her family said always lived life to the fullest. She was loved by her family. She was loved by her friends, and she had her entire life ahead of her. But sadly, that got cut way too short. Now, at the time of Jayna's murder, she was working at a Lululemon store. This store was located in Bethesda, Maryland, and this is a suburb right outside of Washington, D.C., and the Lululemon store was located on a street that locals knew as Bethesda Row. Now, this is more or less a 5-block strip that has bars and restaurants and spas and retail stores. And for all things considered, it is known to be a very nice upscale area. And that is where Jayna was working at the time of her murder. Now, this case begins on March 12th, 2011. On the specific day, there was a 26-year-old man named Ryan. Ryan was waiting outside of the Apple store on Bethesda Row on March 12th. Ryan got to the Apple store bright and early, right before it even opened at 8 a.m. for the purpose of purchasing an iPad. Ryan had gone to the Apple store the day prior. The line was too long. This was around the time period where one of the editions of the iPad had been newly released. There were a lot of people in line. Ryan was not able to purchase the iPad on the 11th, so he decided to get there bright and early before the store even opened at 8 a.m. on the 12th. Now, the store didn't open until 10 a.m., so Ryan had some time to stand outside, wait around for a little bit. And something to know about this Apple store is that it was located right next to the Lululemon store that Jayna was working at. Now, while Ryan was outside of the Apple store waiting for time to pass, that is when he noticed a woman clearly in distress walking out of the Lululemon store, and she was on the phone. The woman who was on the phone was talking to whoever was on the other end of the line, saying that it appeared that someone had broken into the store and she was clearly afraid to go inside. Now, Ryan overheard this conversation, and through hearing it, he was able to put two and two together and figure that this woman worked at Lululemon and that she was on the phone with 911 to report a potential break-in. Now, at this point, after overhearing this, Ryan decided to go up to the woman and ask her if she would like for him to walk through the store while they wait for police to get there, and the woman gladly took Ryan up on his offer. Now, this woman's name was Rachel Ortley, and Rachel was actually the store manager at the time. And like I said, she immediately took Ryan up on his offer, and the two of them began walking through the store together. Now, upon first walking in that front door entryway of the store, both Rachel and Ryan could see that there was blood stains spattered across the floor, and there were also some bloody footprints that were leading to the back corner of the store. Now, in order to understand this Lululemon store, it really makes most sense to break it up into four specific sections. You had the front of the store where a lot of the merchandise was, and then you had the second part of the store where the fitting rooms were. The third section of the store was the stock room in the back, and then behind the stock room itself was a hallway in the back of the store that led to an emergency fire exit. So no one really ever went back there, certainly not customers. Customers really only stayed in the first two sections of the store, which was the first front part, which is where the merchandise was, and the fitting room sections. And then the remainder of it was mainly for employees and, again, that fire exit. So at this point, Rachel and Ryan continue walking throughout the store together, and they are able to see that it does look like there was some sort of a struggle, some sort of a robbery. Not only the blood, however, there were other things in the store that were out of place. There were mannequins knocked over onto the ground, and they kept walking throughout the store, and they got to that last section of that store, that fourth part of the store where the hallway was and where that fire exit door was. Now, at this point, Ryan went to open the door to get into that hallway, to enter that fourth section. However, Ryan was not able to do that because when he tried to open the door, there was something on the other side that was blocking him from being able to do so. At this point, Ryan peeked his head around the door to see what was in his way, and when he looked down, that is when he saw a body face down, surrounded with blood. And sadly, that body would later go on to be identified as Jayna Murray. At this point, Ryan called out to Rachel, who was still at the front of the store. She didn't feel comfortable walking with him throughout the entirety of the store. So Ryan called out to Rachel and said that there was a dead body in the back of the store and to call 911 again. While Rachel was calling 911 again, Ryan at that point turned around and began walking back to the front of the store. However, he stopped in his tracks when he turned to the right and noticed the bathrooms in this Lululemon, and he noticed that there was someone inside of the bathrooms. Now, these bathrooms were single-use bathrooms. They were not bathrooms where you walk in and you see multiple stalls. They were just one room and one bathroom, and there were two of them. So it was very easy when the door was open to see who was in the bathroom. And when Ryan was walking back past the bathroom and looked to his right, that is when he saw another woman on the floor, critically injured. Now, Ryan immediately ran over to help this woman and noticed that her legs were bound at her ankles and her hands were bound over her head, and along with that, her face was covered with blood. Now, this woman would later be identified as 28-year-old Brittany Norwood. Now, luckily for Brittany, she was semi-conscious. She was, however, critically injured. She had clearly suffered a severe amount of trauma. And shortly after Ryan's discovery of Brittany is when police finally arrived to the scene, and they were able to quickly rush Brittany into the ambulance and take her to the hospital. And they also confirmed that sadly, Jayna did succumb to her injuries and pass away. Now, Jayna's autopsy showed that she sustained a total of 331 injuries, and all of those injuries were before she died. Now, 105 of those injuries were defensive injuries, meaning that those injuries were either on Jayna's arms arms or her legs, and she was using her body in order to try and defend herself. She also sustained multiple cuts and bruises. She had 6 blunt force wounds to her head, a stab wound to her shoulder, a ligature mark around her neck, and the medical examiner concluded that there were at least 5 weapons used in Jayna's attack. The medical examiner also stated that Jayna was alive from start to finish throughout all 331 injuries that she sustained. Now, when looking at Jayna's clothing, she did have a hole in her pants, indicating that she could have been sexually assaulted. However, when the medical examiner conducted the autopsy, they were able to conclude that there was no evidence of that. Now, when detectives found Jayna's body, she was laying face down with her right arm crossed underneath her body, indicating that someone had rolled her over at some point in the attack. Nearby Jayna's body was also a toolbox, which is where some of the weapons used against Jayna could have come from. Some of these weapons included a knife, a hammer, and a box cutter, and there was also blood spatter on that toolbox. Now, homicide detective Jim Drury was one of the first to arrive on the scenes, and when he got there, he immediately spoke with Rachel, the manager, who gave him a little bit of a rundown on some of the logistics of the store and how it operated. She told Drury that this specific store had 20 employees. She also stated that the night prior, on the 11th, the store closed at 9:00 p.m., and how it was store policy for whoever was closing the store to clean up and get prepared for the opening shift the following day. Rachel told Detective Drury that Brittany and Jayna were scheduled to close the store. They were the only 2 employees that were on the schedule. She told him that Jayna was a supervisor at the store and Brittany was an entry-level saleswoman who had only been at this specific Lululemon for around a month at that time. Rachel said that she spoke to Jayna on the phone just before 10 p.m. Rachel said that Jayna had actually called her from her car. So after Jayna left the store, Jayna got into her car and called Rachel. When Detective Drury asked Rachel what the phone call was about, Rachel said that Jayna called Rachel to speak about something that is typically known as bag checks. Now, I'm not sure how common this is now. However, in 2011, it was common for retail store workers to check each other's bags to make sure that no one was stealing the merchandise of the store. Now, according to Rachel, she said that this was a common practice that they did at this specific Lululemon, and she said that Jayna had briefly mentioned how she thought it was possible that Brittany was stealing from the store based off of one of these bag checks that they did. Now, at this point, Detective Drury had some questions. He was a little confused, not knowing how Jayna had gotten to her car after leaving her shift for the night, however, somehow ended back up in the store afterwards because that was where her body was discovered. So in order to understand how this all happened, detectives needed to speak to Brittany, who at this point was in the hospital recovering from her injuries. At this point, detectives also did learn more about Brittany and who she was. Brittany grew up in Washington State with 8 brothers and sisters to her mother, who was a stay-at-home mom who did part-time work in advertising, and her father, who ran an upholstery shop. She grew up in a hard-working religious family. She was the 6th child in the lineup of her siblings. One of her sisters was a doctor, and 3 of her brothers were engineers. Brittany was especially close to one of her sisters named Marissa. They were only 17 months apart. They grew up sharing a bedroom, and they both moved to DC around the same time. When Marissa moved to DC, she got a job as a business consultant, and her fiance, who was an operation research analyst, had purchased a home together, and the 2 of them allowed Brittany to rent out the basement of the home from them. Those who knew Brittany said that she was very bubbly, she was very caring, she was very athletic, she played soccer all throughout her life and into college, and she had dreams of one day opening her own gym. She had been working at Lululemon and had an interview to be a personal trainer at a local Equinox gym just 2 days after the attack. Now, police did speak with Marissa, Brittany's sister, who said that Brittany did not come home on Friday night, the 11th, as we know. However, she didn't think that that was completely unusual or cause for concern because Brittany was an adult, so her sister didn't notice. She didn't think that it was something to worry about. Marissa did say that she texted Brittany that following Saturday morning on the 12th, however, received no response. Now, when Brittany arrived to the hospital, she was met by another officer who was just meant to supervise Brittany, and that officer was Officer O'Brien. Now, Officer O'Brien, like I said, was there to supervise and really just stay with Brittany at this time. Officer O'Brien noted that Brittany's clothes were completely covered in blood. Her clothes had multiple different rips in them. Her pants in particular had been slashed all throughout in multiple different places, and she also had several pieces of glass stuck in her back. O'Brien then collected her clothes and put them in bags for evidence. O'Brien watched as Brittany was being tended to by the nurses and doctors, and also noticed a laceration on Brittany's right hand that went from her thumb to her forefinger. Now, after being wheeled into the recovery room, Brittany finally gave her account of what happened on March 11th. Now, according to Brittany, she said that her and Jayna were working the closing shift and that they were the only two employees working that night. Brittany said that they both left the store at approximately 9:45 p.m., and this is when Brittany said that she began walking to the nearby subway station, as that was going to be her means of transportation to get home, and Jayna headed in the opposite direction towards her car. Now, a few minutes later, Brittany realized that she forgot her wallet back in the Lululemon store, so she ended up calling Jayna and asking Jayna, because Jayna had a key, if Jayna could let her into the store so she could get her wallet. Like I mentioned earlier, Jayna was a supervisor and Brittany was an entry-level saleswoman, so Jayna did have the key into the store, and that is why Brittany needed her in order to get her wallet. Jayna agreed to do this, and the two then met back at the store. So this is a big key piece of information because this answers the question as to how did Jayna and Brittany both get back into the store after they had left for the night earlier. Brittany then said that her and Jayna met back at the store. The two entered into the store and deactivated the alarm at 10:05 p.m., but Brittany said that she did not lock the door behind her because she figured that they would be in and out very quickly. All they were doing was looking for her wallet. However, that is when Brittany said that two men covered head to toe with ski masks, gloves, and dark clothing walked into the store and began brutally attacking the both of them. One man was attacking Brittany while the other was attacking Jayna and grabbed Jayna by her hair and dragged her into the back hallway where her body was eventually discovered. Brittany said that the intruder that she was with demanded that she give him money, so she opened the safes that were located behind the cash register and gave him everything that was in there. Afterwards, Brittany said that the man then brought her into the bathroom where he tied her up, raped her, and assaulted her with a wooden hanger. Brittany said she was then hit over the forehead, which made it difficult for her to remember a lot of what happened next. Because of her faulty memory, Brittany said that she was not able to give any description of the men that attacked her and Jayna. She said that she couldn't give an eye color, race, sound of their voice, age range, really nothing. So police really had a hard time trying to figure out which way to go in this investigation. They were really starting with square one. So at this point, the detectives that were back at the Lululemon store decided to go next door to the Apple store. The detective that did this was Mike Karen, and he did this to see if anyone heard any disturbances the night prior on the 11th. He ended up speaking to the store manager in the Apple store, who claimed that she was working on the night of the 11th from 1 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. and was there sometime afterwards closing up the store. She went on to tell the detective that she did hear screaming coming from next door starting sometime after 10 p.m. She said that she could hear other loud noises such as heavy hitting and dragging. She said that she only heard two women's voices, hearing things being said such as, "Talk to me," "Don't do this," "Stop," and "Oh God." Again, she said that she did not hear any male voices, but the reason that she said that she did not do anything about it or call 911 or go next door to see if everything was okay was because it was two female voices and she just figured it was some sort of girl drama happening next door and to stay out of it. Now, something else that caught police's eye from the very beginning was the fact that Jayna's car was not parked right outside of the store. Police figured that since Jayna swung around to let Brittany back into the store to grab her wallet, her car should have been pretty nearby to the store. It was late at night, there weren't going to be many people out at this time, and parking really shouldn't have been an issue, but the car wasn't there. Police did begin searching the surrounding areas to try and search for the car, but that was when a patrolman actually found the car parked 3 blocks away from the Lululemon store, and it was parked behind a local farmer's market. Now, this just seemed like a strange area for Jayna's car to be. Again, there was really no rhyme or reason for the car to be parked in that specific area, and again, 3 blocks just seemed a little bit further than what Jayna would have been able to find if she really was just swinging around to let Brittany in to grab her wallet. Now, the patrolman actually told police that he was working the night prior, and he told authorities that he had seen Jayna's car sitting in this specific same parking spot from 12:30 a.m. So again, the very early morning hours of the 12th. Now, the patrolman said that when he initially saw the car, it was in the same parking lot, and he also claimed that he saw someone sitting behind the wheel in the driver's seat. Now, for police, as you can imagine, this is startling to hear because at this point, both women would have been recently attacked in the store at 12:30, considering that the attack had to have happened shortly around the time after 10 o'clock p.m. Now, the patrolman told authorities that when he saw someone sitting in the car at 12:30, he wasn't really able to make out who it was. He wasn't able to tell if it was a man or if it was a woman, and he didn't think too much of it, so he continued driving. Now, about 2 hours later, he said that he drove through the same area again, and this time he saw Jayna's car still there. It was in the same parking spot in that same lot. However, the only difference was that this time the lights were on. Now, he said that because the lights were on, he wasn't able to get a good idea of if someone was in the car or not. He said he couldn't tell if anyone was inside, so he decided to keep driving. Now, an hour after this second sighting, he returned back to the same lot and noticed Jayna's car again, but this time the lights were off and no one was inside of the vehicle. Now, taking this all into consideration, it was around this time that police were really starting to speculate on Brittany's version of events that she had told them. Some of the things that police really struggled with regarding Brittany's version of events were the fact that Brittany was not able to give any description of the males. They also took into consideration the fact that Brittany had been suspected of stealing from the store from Jayna. And again, they knew that through Rachel. Rachel said Jayna had called her right after work that day, suspecting that Brittany was stealing from the store. Now, along with that, they also took into consideration Brittany's injuries. Brittany had a lot of cuts all over her body. However, when police took a closer look at these injuries and when they got the report back, they realized that Brittany's injuries were mainly superficial. And along with that, her cuts that were all over her body, a lot of them, most of them, if not all of them, were just straight across. And again, they were superficial depth, all straight across, almost as if Brittany was not moving or fighting back when these cuts were inflicted on her. It would just be as if she stood still the whole time. Along with that, when looking at the blood on Brittany's face, it was discovered that the blood was dripping straight down Brittany's face, which isn't too concerning. However, if Brittany was lying down on the bathroom floor, semi-conscious all night like she claims she was, the blood would have flowed down the sides of her face as well. It wouldn't have just gone straight down. And on top of all of this, police now have to consider Jayna's car. The fact that Jayna's car was parked in a random parking lot 3 blocks away, the patrolman saw someone in the car at 12:30, the lights were on sometime around 2:30, things were just starting to not make a whole lot of sense. So at this point, police really did begin to suspect and have questions on whether or not Brittany could have somehow set up a robbery gone wrong in the store. Maybe she knew the robbers. Maybe she helped them get into the store store and something went sideways and got out of hand. Now, when looking at the back hallway of the store, the hallway that led to the back door, which was the fire escape, that same hallway where Jayna's body was discovered, police did notice several things upon taking a closer look. First of all, this was a fire exit. So there was a back door in this hallway, like I said, that led to the outside. There were some bloody footprints all throughout this back hallway. However, once they reached that back door, they stopped. The bloody footprints did not surpass going outside, and this did seem suspicious. However, police did think that there were some explanations for this. It could have been possible that the assailants removed their shoes before running out the door, or they decided to run out the front door instead, but that seemed a little bit risky for authorities. There were also a bunch of trash bags and boxes sitting in this back hallway as well, and one of the boxes was full of zip ties. And again, as I mentioned earlier, both women were restrained with zip ties. Jayna had zip ties as well as Brittany. Now, police wondered how it was possible that the two men, these two possible assailants, would run all through this Lululemon store into the back of the store and, just their luck, found zip ties and used them as restraints. Again, benefit of the doubt, it was possible that the men brought their own zip ties, or they made Brittany and Jayna tell them where they could find restraints, but that just seemed unlikely. At this point, with police's raising suspicions, they decided to take a deeper look into Brittany and a deeper look into her background and really what led her to be at this specific Lululemon store. And this is when they started to learn that Jayna's suspicion of Brittany's theft may not have been too far off. Brittany began working at a different Lululemon store prior to working at the one in Bethesda. She worked at the Georgetown location in DC and was hired immediately. The manager said that she thought Brittany was the absolute perfect hire. She was nice, she was athletic, she was pretty. However, over time, employees began reporting incidents of missing cash, missing things being stolen from their wallets or their purses or from the back room. And while the manager did say she was concerned, no one accused Brittany directly. However, the common denominator was Brittany. When the manager went back to look at all of the shifts that the employees were complaining about, Brittany was working every single one of those shifts. Now, Brittany ultimately was fired from the Georgetown location of Lululemon after Lululemon ran its employees' shop night event, which is where employees can purchase Lululemon for 70% off with a purchase limit of $1,000. Now, I don't know if this is something that they still do. However, in 2011, at these specific locations, this is what was happening. Now, at this time, Brittany did ask her manager if she could exceed this limit, and the manager, who said that she only thought that Brittany was going to go over the limit by a minor amount, the manager said yes. However, Brittany more than doubled the purchase limit at the end of the night, and because of this, she was fired for discount abuse. That is what was cited in her termination papers. Now, that was December of 2010 when she was fired, and by February of 2011, Brittany was starting her first day at the Bethesda store, and a little over a month later, Jayna was murdered. Now, 2 days after the attack on March 14th, Brittany was home from the hospital. So at this point, Detectives Drury and Detective Reuven drove over to Brittany's sister's home, where Brittany lived, to speak with her again. Now, upon sitting down with Brittany, Brittany told authorities that she had great news. And that news was that the Equinox gym that she had been waiting for an interview with had actually heard of the attack and heard of what happened. And they called Brittany to tell her that her job that she applied for was hers whenever she wanted it. She said that all she had to do was get better and call them, and she would be able to work at this gym. And Brittany seemed very, very excited about this. Now, at this point, authorities asked Brittany yet again to run through the sequence of events leading up to the attack. Brittany agreed to do so, and she started out by telling them the same thing that she had said several days prior. She said that her and Jayna closed the store, they left, left, Brittany realized she forgot her wallet. She called Jayna. Jayna told her, oh, it's no big deal. I'll come back and get your wallet, because actually Jayna had also left her laptop in the store. So it wasn't an issue for Jayna to come back and open the store because it was going to help her out anyways. Brittany said that when her and Jayna got to Lululemon, the two of them went inside. However, Brittany was actually unable to find her wallet. She said that she was looking around for it and couldn't find it. And so she decided that she was just going to come back the next day and try to look. Brittany said after making this decision, Jayna offered Brittany her subway fare card, so Brittany would be able to board the subway. And again, the two agreed to come back the following day and look for the wallet. Now, Brittany said it was while they were walking out of the store that the two masked men appeared. And that is when they were attacked. So Brittany really did not give any much more information than her original account. She did not really say anything that was pivotal to the investigation at this point or anything that was new to the investigation. So police just took the account and they were walking out the door. Now, it was while police were leaving the home that Brittany's brother, named Chris, actually walked with authorities to ask them his own questions that he had regarding the case. Chris expressed that as happy as he was that his sister was alive and that she survived the attack, he couldn't help but have some questions. Chris asked authorities, why was his sister's life spared? Why wasn't Brittany also killed? He said that the severity of Jayna's injuries did not match Brittany's injuries, and Chris was just trying to wrap his head around the whole thing. He said that he was having trouble trying to understand how something so horrible could have happened to Jayna, but Brittany was able to survive the attack. Now, what Chris didn't know is that authorities were also asking themselves the same questions. Police were really taken aback by what it seemed that Chris was suggesting. And so at this point, police flat out asked Chris if he believed that his sister was involved. But Chris quickly shut that down. He said that he didn't think that his sister would ever do something like this. However, he did say that if there was one word used to describe his sister, he would say that she was a secretive person. Now, at this point in the investigation, police decide that they need to examine Jayna's car. They need to go through Jayna's car, see if they could find anything in the car. And this was on March 15th. The car at this point was being held in the evidence garage, and crime scene investigators examined the car and swabbed multiple different surfaces to collect any DNA that had been left behind. And when doing that, they discovered multiple findings. The first thing was that they found small drops of blood on the driver's floor mat. There was also blood on the driver's side door. Now, police also found a jacket that had a possible blood stain on it and a hat with a small red smudge on the inside of the cap. So that DNA was all collected and sent off to the lab, and at this point, police were waiting for those results to see if the blood was a match to either Jayna or a match to Brittany. They wanted to see whose blood this was. And while waiting for those results, police asked Brittany to come down to the station again to give over her fingerprints. And police told Brittany that they needed to do this in order to distinguish her DNA from the assailant's DNA, and Brittany agreed to do this. However, their real motive for bringing her back down was to talk to her more about the car. They wanted to learn whether or not Brittany had ever been in Jayna's car before, because if the DNA results came back from the blood that was found in the car and it turns out that it was Brittany's, and if Brittany tells them that she had never been in the car before, that's going to even raise further speculation and more red flags. But they figured that if they flat out asked Brittany if she had been in the car, that she would get defensive and stop talking to them. So they tried to basically get around that by inviting her to give her DNA. Now, upon sitting down with the detectives when Brittany got there and giving over her fingerprints, her and Detective Drury again began talking. And this time, like I mentioned, they were talking about Jayna's car. Now, Brittany told the detectives that that she had seen Jayna's car once before, but she couldn't pick it out of a lineup. She didn't know the age or make or model of the car. She said that she had never been in the car, that Jayna never gave her a ride home. She didn't know what the car really even looked like. So because of that, she is completely denying having any knowledge about the car in general. Now, she also went on to say, in regards to why her life was spared, because again, that was the big question. It was the question that Brittany's own brother even had. Brittany told detectives that the assailant told her, "You're lucky you're cute and you're more fun to mess with." Brittany said that that's what the assailant told her, and she figured that that's why her life was spared, because the assailant either found her to be attractive or found her to be fun or whatever she was trying to insinuate through saying that. But she was saying that that must be why her life was spared. Now, Detective Drury also asked about the zip ties again and where the assailant got the zip ties. However, during this questioning, it was very clear that Brittany was getting uncomfortable and she did ask to leave. However, a few days later, she came back and her story changed again. On March 18th of 2011, Detectives Drury and Reuven sat down again with Brittany. Brittany told Detective Drury immediately upon sitting down that the assailants made her move Jayna's car. So now it went from she'd never seen the car before, couldn't pick it out of a lineup, to now the assailants actually made her move the car. So now she's in the car, she's driving the car. She said that the assailants gave her the keys and forced her to move the car, and she did. She said that she even passed a police officer as she was walking towards the car because the assailants allowed her to move the car on her own. They didn't go with her, but they did tell her that she had 10 minutes or else she was going to die. So they threatened her life, but they gave her 10 minutes and they let her go on her own to move this car, and she passed a police officer but didn't say anything. Now, after about an hour of this interview, Drury confronted Brittany. Detective Drury said that he did not believe her story whatsoever, and in fact, he believed that Brittany was the killer. Now, Brittany immediately denied this, but finally, after 7 hours of interrogation, Brittany cracked. And throughout her confession, which really truly wasn't a full-blown confession, but it was enough for police to follow through with an arrest, Brittany said that she didn't want people to think that she was a bad person. She also said that she didn't start the fight and that Jayna started the fight, and then she stopped talking. But like I said, at that point, that was enough for an arrest, and on March 18th, 2011, Brittany Norwood was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Jayna. Now, the trial for this case began on October 25th, 2011, and ended 8 days later on November 2nd, 2011. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Brittany had attacked Jayna, murdering her and causing 331 injuries to her body, and then staging the scene in order to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. And not only that, but that she too was a victim of the attack. They claimed that Brittany used the sample Lululemon shoe to create bloody footprints from the store. She moved Jayna's car and then staged a robbery. They argued that she then inflicted superficial injuries onto herself, and during the trial, it was revealed that the blood found in Jayna's car was in fact a match to both Jayna and Brittany's blood. The prosecution argued that what they believed happened was that on the night of March 11th, Brittany and Jayna checked each other's bags for unpaid merchandise, and when they did this, Jayna found a pair of stolen pants from Brittany's bag, which is why she called Rachel when she left the store. And Jayna reported the stolen items to Rachel. Several minutes later is when Brittany called Jayna back to come into the store because she forgot her wallet. However, the prosecution believes that the real motive to get Jayna back into the store was murder. On November 2nd, 2011, Brittany was found guilty of first-degree murder, and on January 27th, 2012, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is now serving her time at the Maryland Correctional Institute for Women. And that, you guys, is the Lululemon murder. It is the brutal murder of Jayna Murray. And I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about it. Something that I find so chilling about this case is how Brittany was so willing to paint herself as a victim as well. The lengths that she was willing to go to, how calculated she was in inflicting injuries upon herself, and to make it appear that she too was a victim of this horrific attack and allowing herself to be painted as a victim, accepting job offers, being painted throughout the city as a survivor, when in reality, she's a cold-blooded killer. But let me know what you guys have to say about this case. And with that being said, you guys, that's going to be all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Killer Instinct. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if you're new here, make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We post weekly every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. Like I said, that Patreon link will also be in the description box below for you to check out if you haven't already. I will be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.